Discover the incredible journey, how one book transformed a mafia boss's life in just 6 weeks. In the subdued light of his prison cell, Tony Marino felt the weight of stone walls pressing down on him. He was a notorious boss of the Chicago underworld, respected but always feared. Betrayal had come from his closest associate, leaving him adrift and isolated. The sound of rage filtered through the hallways, echoing the discontent of a world he once controlled. Stripped of his power, he faced grim choices. The very code he lived by, loyalty, respect, power, seemed to corrode with every passing day. Tony's fingers brushed against a worn-out book, a gift from a prison guard who saw more than just a mobster in the man. It belonged to his late grandfather, a beacon of hard work and dreams to which the man had never measured up. As he opened the pages, Tony was back in his hometown, in his grandfather's warm kitchen, scent wafting from simmering sauce, laughter ringing through the air. Those Sunday dinners full of love and connection were a reminder of the man he hadn't been in years. Could these teachings of hard work and integrity pierce through the thick armor of his criminal life? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. He turned a page, and words leapt out at him, wisdom sewn into lessons of community strength and honor. Each story distilled doubt into clarity, tugging at the dark corners of his fragmented conscience. His muscles tensed. Could one choice really change everything? The examples of integrity clashed violently with his life of crime. The voices from his past, those of his old associates, whispered in his ear, taunting his dilemma, insisting loyalty demanded violence, not contemplative resolve. Eyes narrowed with distrust besieged his mind. Men he had once considered brothers now loomed as phantoms of intimidation in those echoing halls. The stakes grew higher with each visit, their threats a sharp reminder that any deviation from the family's criminal code would lead to consequences he could scarcely fathom. Images of fear struck through Tony's heart, maintaining loyalty against the possibility of a new life mirrored the dichotomy of his existence. Haunting echoes of his grandfather's voice pushed through the cacophony. A man's worth is tied not to the shadows he may navigate, but to the light he has the courage to seek. The prison walls felt like a vice as he remembered tales of resilience. If a humble farmer could cultivate a better life through grit and determination, what could he do? But the fear of abandonment by those he loved, whether by blood or betrayal, churned in his gut, a visceral battle that threatened to rip him apart. An ultimatum arrived like a cannon blast: commit an act of violence or forfeit everything he cherished. The clock ticked louder as he weighed his options, and with every beat, the pressure mounted. Would he succumb to the man he has always been, or forge a path away from the chains of his past? As footsteps approached, a sickening wave of unrest washed over him. The tension tightened with every breath he took, the path forward murky yet illuminated by a flicker of hope. He was on the brink of a revelation, but the darkness was relentless, leaving him questioning, could he ever escape the fate he had sealed with blood? The clattering of heavy boots interrupted Tony's spiraling thoughts, each step echoing like a countdown to a fate he dreaded. He straightened himself, the book still cradled in his hands, an anchor amidst the storm. As the door creaked open, the figure of Marco, a lieutenant on his former team, filled the doorway. The dim light revealed his hardened expression, a mixture of disappointment and determination. "Tony," Marco began, his voice low and gravelly, "you've been talking to yourself a lot these days. Planning a way out?" The challenge was unmistakable, a snarl wrapped in concern. Old loyalties lingered in the air, like smoke from a fading fire. Tony's throat tightened. The prospect of simply denying the accusation felt like a retreat. "I'm thinking, Marco. About choices." There it was, the truth laid bare. The words felt liberating, yet they echoed with the danger of those he once called brothers. Choices? Like skipping out on the family? That's a choice you can't afford, Marco warned, stepping closer, eyes narrowing. They expect you to lead, not to waver. The reminder slammed into Tony's chest, a visceral reaction to the grim reality of his past. He searched Marco's eyes for a flicker of the camaraderie they once shared. What if I don't want this anymore? The weight of the question hung in the air, electrified with tension. Marco chuckled darkly, dismissing the notion. What you want doesn't matter. You owe us, Tony. All of it. But with every heartbeat, Tony's resolve forged a path through the shadows. Does loyalty mean I throw away my soul? Marco hesitated, a crack forming in his certainty. For a moment, the facade of loyalty faltered, revealing a hint of uncertainty. Tony seized the opportunity. That's not who I am. I can't be that man. Then be prepared for what's coming, Marco retorted, stepping back, his eyes flashing with warning. You think you can just walk away? Forget your name, your blood. They'll come for you. They'll come for us all. As the door slammed shut behind Marco, Tony felt the air thicken with uncertainty. Alone once more, he turned back to the book, the lessons within pulsing against the backdrop of his conflict. Words of resilience, determination, and integrity reached out to him, swirling through his consciousness, beckoning to be applied in life's unforgiving arena. In that moment, clarity struck. He had been operating within the confines of a moral quagmire, suffocating beneath the weight of expectations. What if the very principles he had ignored, those of hard work and honor, could outline a new path, one that wouldn't lead to violence? Determination swelled within him. He could dismantle the very code that had trapped him. It wouldn't be easy, and the ghosts of his past would linger, but a flicker of hope had ignited a new purpose. Tony reached for a pen and a scrap of paper, his fingers trembling with the intensity of his decision. He began to scribble down thought, strategies not for violence, but for redemption. Plans to confront not just the substantial threats looming outside the prison walls, but also the formidable barriers within himself. This wasn't the end, it was a beginning, though the path would twist through shadows long and dark. His resolve sharpened with each stroke of the pen, and he realized perhaps, just perhaps, he could redefine who he was meant to be. But as he finished, a chilling knock reverberated against the metal door once more, pulling him back into the reality he desperately sought to escape. Would this moment become another chain, or was it a step toward his liberation? The answer loomed ominously ahead, a truth he had yet to confront, stirring in him a desperate need to find out. The knock echoed once more, shaking Tony from the fragile hope he had just woven into plans. Stepping back, he felt adrenaline course through him, raising the hairs on the back of his neck. This was not just a sound, it felt laden with expectation, with judgment. Did they sense his resolve shifting? Were they coming to reclaim him for a past he longed to escape? He moved hesitantly toward the door, each step a battle between his instinct to retreat and the emerging version of himself poised to confront whatever lay beyond. With a deep breath, he swung open the door, ready to face the unknown. To his surprise, it was just a guard, a familiar face from the other side of the walls that had confined him for too long. "Visit," the guard muttered, handing Tony a crumpled piece of paper. "You've got a visitor." The implication of that word gripped him with a mix of anticipation and dread. He opened the paper, revealing a name that stung like ice water: Mia. His sister. After the fallout of years spent in the shadows, he felt an overwhelming rush of emotions, memories of laughter, tears, and protective instincts flooded his mind. Would she be the light he needed, or a reminder of shadows he was attempting to evade? As he was escorted through the narrow, fluorescent-lit halls, Tony's thoughts tumbled over one another. He had always thought of himself as the protector of his family, yet here he stood, an unwilling subject of their past. What would she see in him? Would she recognize the man he longed to become, or would she see the fractured version of a brother who had abandoned their values? Walking into the small visiting room, he found Mia sitting nervously at a table, her face a mixture of hope and concern. The moment she caught his eye, her expression flickered back to warmth. It was the kind of warmth only a sibling could offer, one that tugged at the threads of his buried guilt. "Tony," she said, hesitating as she reached for his hand. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too," he replied, the words feeling heavy with unspoken years and unmade choices. As they engaged in conversation, he could see in her eyes the deeper questions coursing through her mind. How did he end up here? Did he still care about family? As she talked about what she had endured during his absence, the strain of survival etched deeper lines in her face. Each syllable drew Tony closer to understanding the consequences of his choices, not just for him, but for those who had remained anchored in the world he had tried to escape. "Please, promise me you'll get out of here soon. We need you, Tony." "I need you," Mia urged, her voice laced with urgency. The stakes were no longer just about him. Tony felt the shift within, a thorny resolution intertwining with a sense of responsibility. "I'm trying, Mia. I want to change, I need to change." He caught a fleeting glimmer of hope in her eyes, but also fear, the lingering doubt that could flay open old wounds if he failed to fulfill his promises. With every revelation they shared, he began to identify the corrupted roots of his past and the burgeoning desires for redemption. As their conversation wound down, Mia leaned closer, her voice lowering. "There is something I need to tell you. It's about the family, and what is happening while you're in here." Her words hung in the air, thick with implication, unraveling the threads of the conversation into a web of new truths he wasn't prepared for. His heart raced, a slow sting of uncertainty gripped him. Would his next steps lead him towards liberation, or deeper into the chaos of his past choices? As the visit came to an end, Tony realized he stood at a threshold, a tectonic shift beneath him. The weight of the decisions he had to make loomed larger, and with it, the urgency to redefine his purpose. The moment of truth approached, and he felt the draw of confrontation both with his past and the choices he needed to act upon. He watched Mia walk away, fleeting determination sparking in his chest. Yet without grounding, without clarity, he was at the brink of another abyss. Would he embrace the impending storm, or would he let it pull him under? The echo of Mia's words lingered in the small visitation room, intertwining with Tony's racing thoughts. He sank back into a hard plastic chair, hands clasped tightly, grappling with the mountain of emotions churning inside him. Each one was a reflection of his past, a past that seemed suddenly vivid and inescapable. The promise he had made to his sister weighed heavily. It was impossible to ignore the very real implications of her plea. In those brief moments together, Tony had glimpsed not just the sister he cherished, but the stakes of his own choices. The gravity of the revelations she hinted at gnawed at him, whispering that the consequences were darker than he could fathom. What was happening with the family while he was imprisoned? He needed to find answers, but the thought of venturing back into the chaos of his old life petrified him. Tony sat there, lost in contemplation, recalling the security of their childhood. He had been a protector, the unwavering shield against the world outside. Yet here he was, confined, a ghost of who he aspired to be. He remembered the way Mia used to look up at him, her eyes brimming with trust. If he let her down again, what would become of her and of him? As the guard signaled that visiting hours were over, Tony stood slowly, the reality of his situation settling with a dull weight. Each step back to his cell felt like a descent into a deeper abyss. The familiar fluorescent lights flickered above, casting stark shadows on the walls, mirroring the uncertainty that enveloped him. He returned to the cramped confines of his cell, the bars stark against a world he desperately wanted to penetrate but could not yet touch. Sinking onto his bunk, he closed his eyes tightly, urging the memories of their conversation to come into sharper focus. What had he really learned about himself, about the man he wished to rebuild? In the quiet of his isolation, a realization dawned: he could either remain a puppet of his past or take the helm of his destiny. The thought ignited a small flame within him, a pledge to confront whatever awaited him outside these walls. But how? He reached for a scrap of paper, fingers quaking as he jotted down his goals, simple yet profound. Get through the days focusing on change, learn from others where possible, and the most important, listen to Mia's words. They were more than just family ties, they were tethered to a deeper call for transformation. Each word he penned transformed the paper into a blueprint for his rebirth. As he finished writing, an unexpected wave of hope washed over him. Hope was disconcerting, but it glimmered at the frayed edges of his consciousness, urging him forward. It was time to begin conditioning his mind, to sharpen his resolve. The days turned into a blur of reflection and planning. He sought the company of other inmates who had turned their lives around, finding wisdom from unexpected sources. The prison library became his refuge, filled with narratives of survival and reshaping. He immersed himself in those tales, recognizing bits of himself in their struggles, allowing the stories to inspire his own journey. But amid newfound strategies emerged gnawing questions. Would he truly be able to reconcile with the family he haunted? The world he once tried to escape was not just fading memories, it was alive, breathing, and changing without him. Each encounter drew closer to the inevitable clashes with his connections from the past. As days passed, the resolve solidified, but so did the tension. Every encounter made the launch towards his future more precarious. With the undefined turbulence of the outside world looming, there loomed a darker shadow. Questions about safety, respect, and conflict hung heavily in the air, each one pressing against the fragile hope he was nurturing. Then, the unexpected happened. A notice slipped through his bars, a transfer request. The aching anticipation clawed at him. Would this be another escape route, or merely tossing him into the unknown? He took a deep breath, the air palpable with uncertainty. The path forward would entail more than just a decision, it would require courage to face whatever opposition awaited him. The time had come to confront not just the past he had fled, but the choices that would ignite the next chapter of his life. Tomorrow, he would find out where this transfer led. But in his gut, he felt one undeniable truth this time: he wouldn't run away. He would stand firm and face whatever challenges awaited him. The transfer notice sat on his bed like a ticking time bomb, an invitation to a new chapter, yet steeped in uncertainty. As dawn crept into the cell, casting pale rays across the cold concrete, Tony's thoughts spiraled through scenarios, a mix of anxiety and fervent anticipation. Would this be his salvation or his doom? When the guards arrived, it was with the same indifferent expressions that marked their daily routine, but Tony felt different, charged with a fierce determination. As he followed them down the familiar corridors lined with empty stares and disapproving whispers, he mentally rehearsed his plan. He had nurtured hope, held it deep within, and now it was time to act on it. The intake process at the new facility was a blur of monotony. Strip search, paperwork, orientation. Every step felt like a decision point in which he could either solidify his newfound resolve or retreat into his old defenses. But as he was assigned to a dimly lit cell and handed his new uniform, an unexpected sensation washed over him: defiance. This was a second chance. Not just a transfer, but an opportunity to redefine his existence, free from the shadows of his past. But to do this, he knew he had to establish himself anew among strangers who might see him as just another inmate. He needed to identify allies and draw boundaries around respect both for himself and others. That evening, he sat with a group of inmates who played cards at the worn table in the common area. They eyed him with skepticism, remnants of their own battles evident in their hardened expressions. Yet, as he joined their game, he recalled the wisdom he had learned during his reflective days. This was not just about fitting in, this was about building a bridge from his past actions to a present where he sought redemption. In between hands, Tony engaged them in conversation, carefully weaving his story, not as an excuse but as an unveiling of the man he intended to become. He didn't shy away from the truth of his previous life, rather, he faced it head-on, integrating lessons learned along the way. Each revelation sparked interest, transforming wary glances into contemplative nods. Little by little, he found himself not only accepted but respected. By the end of the week, he was invited to share his thoughts on personal growth during a group discussion initiated by another inmate who had also undergone a transformation. It was a catch-22 moment. He could either stand before them vulnerable yet empowered or withdraw and let the opportunity slip away. The decision was instantaneous. He stepped forward. His voice, once a whisper of fear, roared with conviction as he articulated his struggles and aspirations. Sharing felt liberating, a declaration that he was ready to break free from the chains of his past. This was more than self-therapy, it was a tactical move to alleviate the weight of expectations and to forge connections with men who had faced their failures. After the session, Tony felt a shift in dynamics. He was no longer just an isolated individual dragging the weight of his past, he was a voice among men, a participant in their collective struggle for meaning and change. They invited him to work together on personal projects, and in those exchanges, a certain camaraderie began to develop. However, the newfound trust didn't come without challenges. Rumors circulated, rivalries stirred, and moments of tension echoed through the halls. Misunderstandings could easily unravel the bonds he began to establish. In those moments, Tony faced a moral dilemma: should he confront the source of the rumors, risking everything he had just built, or should he play it safe and let it fizzle out, allowing the status quo to reign? By the end of the second week, he realized that avoidance was not a strategy for growth, it was a recipe for stagnation. The time came to confront his fears and deal directly with the conflicts arising from his past choices. That night, as he lay on his new bunk, staring at the ceiling, a familiar weight settled on him. He understood that the road to redemption wasn't paved with comfort but rather with confrontation and resolution. Tomorrow would test his resolve in ways he had yet to comprehend, but he felt unequivocally ready to engage. The sound of the guard's footsteps echoed through the corridor, signaling the dawn of another day filled with promise and peril. Tony prepared himself for the encounters that awaited him, knowing that the truth of his transformation was about to be both challenged and reinforced. But a question hung in the air, taunting him: would he be able to maintain his newfound path when the specters of his past vociferously demanded attention? Tony awoke with an unsettling feeling, a mix of anticipation and dread. The echoes of the previous days reverberated in his mind, and he could sense the tides shifting around him. As he slipped into his uniform, the weight of the fabric felt heavier than it had a day ago. It carried not just his identity as an inmate, but the implications of what he'd chosen to pursue: a life not dictated by his past. In the common area, the usual crowd was there, a testament to their routine. He scanned the faces, recognizing the shifting dynamics. There were glances that lingered just a moment too long, whispers that hushed as he approached. Today was the day he had decided to confront the rumors circling about him. Avoiding confrontation was no longer an option, doing so would undermine everything he'd worked for. He took a seat at the table where the cards were shuffled and laughter usually resounded. But today, the atmosphere felt charged, tense. Before he could draw a breath, Jake, an imposing figure with a reputation for intimidating anyone who crossed him, called him out for his recent rise in status among the other inmates. "Tony, I hear you've been spreading stories about how you're changing. Is it true? Or just another closed chapter in your past?" The challenge hung in the air, and Tony recognized the fight in Jake's eyes. This was more than idle gossip, it was a direct attack on the credibility he had begun to establish. He could either back down, letting Jake claim dominance, or he could rise to the occasion, both for himself and the transformation he sought. "I've faced my past," he said, his voice steady. "I own my mistakes. But I'm here to learn from them, not relive them. I'm not asking for your approval, I'm showing you I'm not the same person." The response ignited a flicker of surprise in the group. They were silent, waiting for the fallout. Jake leaned back, evaluating him with newfound curiosity. "So what's your plan? One day at a time? How does that mean you won't slip back?" Tony inhaled deeply, recognizing this was the moment to back up his words with more than bravado. "By taking responsibility, not just for myself, but for the trust this place demands. I'll mentor those who want to grow past their mistakes, just as I am. Leadership isn't about fear, it's about creating change alongside others." The tension shifted, the other inmates leaned in, intrigued. This was no mere bravado, Tony was laying down a challenge, not only to Jake but to everyone present. By standing his ground, he had transformed a potentially hostile confrontation into an invitation for dialogue. The group erupted into discussions, some voicing skepticism while others weighed in with tales of their own potential for change. Voices raised in passion rather than aggression, building a platform for connection instead of division. Tony found himself speaking more, sharing not only his story but tapping into their desires for growth. He revealed the moments that triggered his transformation, hoping to spark similar realizations in others. As the conversations flowed, Tony sensed something shifting within him, an undercurrent of confidence that surged with each shared story. It was exhilarating and terrifying. But amid the excitement, a familiar voice nagged at him. This boldness, even if rooted in sincerity, invited scrutiny. Would they believe him? Would they think he was merely putting on a front? By the end of the session, fatigue washed over him. He had only begun to scratch the surface of confronting his past but felt the weight of new expectations resting on his shoulders. As the day unfolded, the realization hit him: every challenge would not just test his resolve but also glean insights into his strengths and vulnerabilities. That night, in the stillness of his cell, Tony questioned if he had truly committed to his path. Would the fire he ignited amongst his peers kindle his transformation or expose his insecurities? The risk felt monumental, a test of his capacity to maintain authenticity amid doubt. Before drifting to sleep, the question lingered: what if the real confrontation was not just with others, but within himself? The next day would certainly reveal more than he could imagine. Morning arrived quietly, its muted light folding into the crevices of Tony's cell. He stirred, wrestling with the lingering feelings of doubt that had intruded upon his sleep. The details of last night's confrontation replayed in his mind like a broken record. He had taken a step forward, but could he maintain the momentum? Each thought felt like a weight, pressing against his resolve. The breakfast routine felt ritualistic, mundane even against the backdrop of chaos that defined prison life. The clatter of trays and the rustle of uniforms filled the air like a dull roar. As he moved through the line, he couldn't shake the underlying apprehension that every set of eyes was a potential judge of his intentions. He resolved to navigate this day differently, viewing each interaction as a chance to solidify his newfound path. After breakfast, he found himself sitting outside in the yard under the hazy sun, a place that often felt oppressive yet oddly liberating. He noticed several inmates gathered, their bodies stiffening as they recognized him. They looked to one another, whispering. The earlier confrontation with Jake had rippled through the community, awakening curiosity but also skepticism, just as he had anticipated. "Hey, Tony," a voice called out, breaking through the murmur. It was Malik, a younger inmate known for his keen mind despite the tough exterior. "I heard what you said yesterday. You really think you can help us?" Tony rose from his spot, drawn into the conversation as if it was an uncharted territory. "I don't have all the answers, Malik, but I think we can figure it out together." The sincerity in his voice surprised him, it was raw and unfiltered. But fear tugged at him. What if he couldn't deliver? The more they spoke, the more Tony realized that his role could evolve beyond mere words. His previous life had been steeped in power, but power could manifest in leadership, guidance, and responsibility. He proposed they organize a discussion group, a safe space for sharing stories and strategies for growth. To his relief, a few inmates nodded in agreement, their expressions softening with possibility. Days passed, and every gathering transformed Tony. He was learning to steer conversations away from self-pity and toward empowerment. Each session peeled back layers not just of their shared mistakes, but of their humanity. He saw their struggles as reflections of his own, recognizing vulnerabilities that ran deep. Yet, the internal conflict persisted. Each time he felt he was growing, a dark whisper nudged him, asking if he was just pretending. Could he truly evolve, or would he always be tethered to the shadows of his past? Then came the day when he received news: a family member was critically ill. The sudden rush of emotions surged through him like ice water. Should he reach out to the one person he had tried to escape for years? The thought felt like a betrayal. What if contacting them made him revert to his old self? It was a dilemma that cut him deeply. As he stood in the yard, the world around him seemed to blur. He envisioned the conversations he had built with the other inmates, the lives he hoped to inspire. If he chose to disengage from his past completely, would he miss the chance to forge a new relationship with family? Or could confronting his past, after all this time, offer a path to healing instead? The tension escalated, his next steps weighed heavily in his mind. Before him lay a choice, to reach out and possibly ignite the fires he had once extinguished, or to remain on the trajectory he'd built with careful intention. The clock ticked down to a decision, one that would test not only his commitment to change but the foundation of who he was becoming. As uncertainty clung to him, one thought crystallized: he could either run from his history or embrace it as a catalyst for growth. The moment had come to face not just his demons but the darkness he had long sought to escape. Would reaching out re-establish his connection to his troubled past, or could this be the key that unlocked a future he had never dared to imagine? Tony stood alone in the yard, the sun sinking low in the sky, casting long shadows that mirrored his inner turmoil. The whispers of the other inmates faded into a backdrop of uncertainty, and his heart pounded with the weight of his decision. Should I reach out or remain hidden in the safety of my newfound persona? The suggestion of reconnecting with his family was daunting. It felt like inviting chaos back into a carefully constructed life. Yet, he sensed something shifting within him, a desire not just to heal but to redefine what healing meant. It was in this moment of tension that he felt a push to confront the past. There were conversations he had avoided for too long, and now they demanded his attention. The horror stories shared among his peers were akin to his own, and he realized that the very struggles he sought to distance himself from could also be the threads that tied him to a greater sense of purpose. He had stepped into this role of leadership, but could he genuinely lead without acknowledging his roots? Days dragged into a haze as he continued his discussion groups. Each meeting chipped away at his facade, revealing hollow spaces where insecurity lurked, but also a formidable willingness to grow. As he listened to others share their tales, he felt buoyed by a belief that healing was possible through vulnerability. Tony challenged them to draft letters to family, to weave their emotions into words they may never send. Gravitation toward honesty became a theme that resonated deeply, yet another question lingered at the back of his mind: would he be able to do the same? Then, one evening, with the group feeling particularly inspired after a session focused on accountability, a serendipitous moment arose. Malik turned to Tony, his youthful face glowing with naive determination. "You should write that letter too, Tony. It's about facing the truth, right? You always say we need to confront our past to move forward." Tony's heart raced as the silence settled. The suggestion hung in the air like a fragile promise. He was suddenly faced with a revelation of his own intimacy with the same challenges he encouraged them to navigate. Here he was, embodying the very ideals he preached, yet standing impotent before his own fear. This moment threatened to unveil the way he had been masking his doubts, yet also laid bare the potential within him. Days passed, and though he contemplated what Malik had said, it was not until the following week that he finally took pen to paper. The first sentence floated across the page, declaring his intent, but each subsequent word became a battle. He detailed the hurt he had felt, he traversed memories that never seemed too far away. That simple act of writing forced him to penetrate layers of resentment, grief, and regret. As the ink dried, he felt surprisingly liberated. The enormity of emotions transposed onto that page transformed his apprehension into something tangible. Yet, the struggle had merely begun. The act of sending it felt like standing on the edge of a precipice. Would he falter? Could he send the letter and confront the chaos it might unleash? Uncertainty gripped him as he held the envelope, a vessel of fears and hopes wrapped into one. In the grim light of his cell, he saw the invitation as both an anchor and a sail, a tether to his past while affording him the freedom to redefine his future. The weight pulsed within him, and just as he took a deep breath to make a decision, a knock echoed on his cell door. The guard stepped in with a grave expression. "You've received news, it's urgent." Tony's heart quickened. Was this news about his family? A tumultuous swell of fear and anticipation washed over him as he caught the guard's eye. What awaited him on the other side of this information? Would it bring clarity or plunge him deeper into the uncertainty he had just begun to face? As he braced himself for whatever lay ahead, he was acutely aware that this moment could redefine everything he had worked to establish, shaking the foundation he had cautiously built. The guard's words hung heavily in the air, slicing through the buzz of his thoughts like a razor. News, urgent news. Tony had been waiting for a sign, a whisper from the outside world that could lead him on a new path, but now, the prospect filled him with dread. Was it the call for reintegration he had naively hoped for? Or something darker, a revelation that could dismantle everything he had painstakingly crafted in this space of self-discovery? "Follow me," the guard instructed tersely, turning sharply on his heels. As Tony stepped out of his cell, he felt a rare flutter of anxiety. The cold concrete corridor stretched ahead, illuminated intermittently by flickering fluorescent lights. Each step echoed his heart pounding louder with every reverberation, each beat a reminder of the risks he faced. He was not just Tony anymore, the inmate drowning in despair. He had grown into a figure of potential with responsibilities, a guide for others navigating the stormy seas of their own histories. Yet now, uncertainty loomed with renewed intensity. He was led to a small room, where a phone sat on a battered table, its surface stained and scratched. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with unspoken tense emotions. The guard gestured toward the phone, and Tony took a seat, heart racing with mixed emotions. What if the news shattered the delicate balance he had just begun to understand? "Take your time," the guard said, leaving him alone in the austere room. Tony grasped the receiver, the plastic warm against his skin, and hesitated. He could feel the weight of the letter still resting in his pocket, its inked confession battling against the secrets clamoring for his attention. He tried to breathe, to find stillness amidst the noise swirling within him. "Who is it?" he asked, forcing the words out, his voice trembling slightly. "Tony, it's your sister, Maria." Her voice was familiar and achingly distant, echoing through a tunnel that felt more like a memory than a reality. He closed his eyes, the image of her laughter mingling with the pang of regret. "Tony," her voice broke slightly, and a flood of emotions surged through the receiver. "I didn't know where to turn. Mom, she's." The words hung in the air, a heavy truth that made his chest tighten. Instinctively, he braced himself for what suffered beneath her hesitations. Each pause felt like an eternity, his stomach twisting as memories of family disputes, of unspoken grievances, rushed back to the forefront of his mind. "She's falling apart without you, Tony. She needs you. We all do." The ache of her words ricocheted inside him. How could he ever hope to be their anchor when he was still trying to become unmoored from his own past? The very thought sent panic coursing through his veins. Could he truly be the person she depended on? Could he confront the chaos he feared, or would his return simply grip the family tighter in the cycle of turmoil they longed to escape? "Tony. Are you still there?" Maria's voice penetrated through his fog of thoughts. "Yeah, I'm here," he breathed, awareness dawning within him. The call was not just about the burdens of the past, it was an opportunity to reclaim agency over his life. As the conversation slipped deeper into revelations of family fractures, of hopes for the future, he found that he was challenging his own narrative, turning the very chaos he feared into a catalyst for growth. The contentment he once found in isolation began to feel suffocating. The time had come to confront both his past and his potential contribution to his family's healing. When the call ended, Tony felt paradoxically lighter and heavier at the same time. The walls had shifted, and his resolve crystallized into a newfound sense of urgency for his transformation. As he made his way back to his cell, the envelope beckoned from his pocket, feeling like a promise. Could it be that the truth he had written could now pave the way for reconciliation with his family? The weight lifted only slightly, leaving room for raw determination. The struggle was far from over, it had just begun. He stopped short as he stood before his cell door, new decisions swirling in his mind. The siren call of the past wrapped around him tightly, yet the pull toward family felt stronger than ever. But the question remained, would he dare to embrace the chaos to find the clarity he sought, or would it shatter the fragile constructs he'd established in his own heart? The moment of action lingered in the air, begging the silent contemplation he had so carefully orchestrated with his writing. Would he summon the strength to face the reality that awaited him once more? Tony's resolve simmered, fueled by the weight of Maria's words echoing in his mind. The past, a haunting specter, loomed in the shadows, but his desire to reclaim his life overshadowed the fear of what could unravel if he reached out. He stood at the precipice of a decision that could potentially fracture or forge stronger bonds with his family. That night, cradled by the dim light of his cell, he pulled out the letter he had written, a tangible testament to his struggle for redemption. Maybe it wasn't just about unveiling his truths, it was about facing them head-on. With the ink softening on the page, he felt it calling to him, urging him to share his journey of transformation with the very family that had once been a source of his turmoil. In the following days, he prepared not only for the confrontation with his family but also for a potential reunion fraught with vulnerability. Conversations with the inmates around him had crystallized his understanding of healing. They were profound discussions about navigating pain and reconciling with the past. Those exchanges illuminated his perspective, and he realized that his family, like him, had suffered in silence. The importance of connecting not just with them but also with his own emotions became clear. In a moment of brave clarity, he decided to send a letter detailing his journey of change, his aspirations for reconciliation, and an acknowledgement of the harm he had caused. It wasn't merely an apology but a plea for a new chapter, not just for him but for them as well. He felt a surge of empowerment as he sealed the letter, a symbolic act of releasing his burden and extending a hand toward healing. The days that followed were filled with anticipation and anxiety as he awaited a response. Each tick of the clock seemed to echo with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Then, one quiet afternoon, the news arrived: a reply from Maria. As he tore open the envelope, his hands trembled, betraying his composure. "Tony, I'm so proud of you for everything you're doing. Mom is still struggling, but I see hope." Her words, simple yet profound, washed over him with a sense of relief and conviction. She detailed their family's hardships and expressed their desire for him to return, not as the lost brother cloaked in shame but as the protector who could guide them. For the first time in years, Tony felt accepted, not just as a fractured human but as a catalyst for healing. Emboldened by her response, he found himself increasingly aware of the transformative power of facing fears. He resolved to approach the upcoming family visit prepared to bridge the gap between their past and the new path he envisioned. As he stood in line to meet Maria, followed by the looming threat of injury from the underworld still lurking around him, he repeated one mantra in his mind: "This is not just a meeting, it is a reclamation of who I am." When they finally sat together, Maria's eyes shone with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "You look different, Tony. Stronger." The acknowledgement fueled his spirit, allowing him to flow with the rhythm of vulnerability and hope. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he replied, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice. "About who I was, and who I want to be." He opened up about his time in prison, how he had rediscovered his values, the lessons from his grandfather bringing clarity to his chaotic life. Each revelation wove itself into the conversation, creating a tapestry of understanding that stitched together their estranged ties. Maria listened intently, absorbing his words as if they were rays of sunshine breaking through the clouds. "We need you, Tony. But you need to be honest with yourself too. We can face this together." It was the moment of truth he had longed for, the dawning realization that healing transcended solitude. The conversation morphed into a dialogue about trust, expectations, and guided aspirations. They reaffirmed their connection, not as a family tethered by blood or mistakes but as individuals committed to embracing change together. Leaving that visit, Tony felt a newfound sense of purpose swelling within him. He had achieved something beyond personal redemption. He had re-established a relationship rooted in respect, vulnerability, and honesty. He remembered his mantra: different beginnings sprout from the same soil, recognizing that his fears had transformed into fertile ground for renewal. With every passing day, Tony felt his transformation solidify. He became a beacon of hope among the inmates, igniting conversations about emotional growth and aspirations rather than mere survival. Marked as a man reborn, he redefined not just who he was within those prison walls but who he aspired to be back home, a brother, a protector, a guiding light. As he prepared for release, Tony looked in the mirror, standing with his shoulders squared, gaze unwavering. He had conquered not just the ghosts of his past but had embraced the promise of who he could become. With solid confidence and a clear vision for his future, he felt ready to step out into the world. Finally liberated from confinement, he whispered the initials of his new identity: TSE, transformed. Stronger. Empowered. The world awaited him with open arms, and now, he was ready to embrace it. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, it truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending, we want to hear from you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.